And returning to our earlier story, proceedings at the International Court of Justice, which are looking into Israel's humanitarian obligations in the occupied Palestinian territories. Member states have raised concerns that humanitarian work in Gaza is in danger of collapse because of Israel's actions. The Palestinian ambassador to the Netherlands has accused Israel of, quote, destroying the fundamentals of life in Palestine.
That's really the heart of why Palestine and over 40 other states are addressing the court today. It is not about the number of aid trucks Israel is or is not allowing into the occupied Palestinian territory, especially Gaza. It is not about Israel destroying it is about Israel destroying the fundamentals of life in Palestine while it blocks UN and other humanitarians from providing life-saving aid to the population. It is about Israel unraveling fundamental principles of international law, including their obligations under the UN Charter. It is about Israel turning Palestine, in particularly Gaza, into a mass grave for Palestinians and those coming to their aid.
We'll now speak to Ardi Imseis, who's a legal representative of the State of Palestine at the International Court of Justice. He's a professor at Queen's University and also the author of the United Nations and the Question of Palestine. Joining us from The Hague, Mr. Imseis, good to have you with us on the News Hour. You and your team presented your legal arguments on the first day of the court's proceedings. What's the takeaway message, and what measure of justice do you believe could be achieved?
Well, thanks for having me, Dareen. The takeaway is that we presented evidence, empirical evidence, legal assessment before the court, indicating that what Israel's obligations are in relation to the presence of third parties, that is the United Nations, third states, and other international organizations in the occupied Palestinian territory who work in providing humanitarian aid and assistance to the Palestinian people in their time of need, which is particularly bad, as you know, at the moment, but also in support of the Palestinian people's right to the exercise of self-determination. So it was rather wide and all-encompassing. We made our submissions, and we do hope that the court will return an opinion that is positive.
Explain to our international audience, if you may, what the legal obligations of Israel actually are as an occupying force of the Palestinian territories.
Yeah, so the first thing that we should think about is sort of recall what the International Court of Justice did and pronounced just last July. It pronounced that Israel's very presence in the occupied Palestinian territory is an internationally wrongful act, by which it means it is an aggression. They're not entitled, as a result, the Israelis, to physically remain in the occupied Palestinian territory at all. So that's the first thing. But the court also reminded us last summer that to the extent the Israelis do remain in the occupied Palestinian territory, they remain an occupying power, albeit an illegal one, and bound, therefore, by certain obligations under international humanitarian law, the laws of war, and human rights law, which in effect can be sort of summed up in the following: that the occupying power has the obligation to maintain its governance over the occupied territory in the best interests of the occupied Palestinian population. Your listeners and your watchers will know that that isn't in fact what's happening. It's quite the opposite. And that is precisely why this question was put to the court by the General Assembly last December. All of this is in response, in effect, to what the Israelis have been doing since 7 October 2023, but it also touches on things that go well prior to that. The situation in occupied Palestine is particularly bad: forcible transfer, starvation as a tool of war, indiscriminate bombardment. The Nakba continues, and in ways and means that are really unprecedented in the history of the Palestinian people. And so the submissions that were made before the court today focused on the IHL obligations. For instance, the occupying power has an obligation to facilitate what we call relief schemes for the benefit of the protected population. Now, you know, the occupying power has banned UNRWA from operating in the occupied Palestinian territory, and UNRWA, of course, is the means through which these relief schemes had for decades been dispensed to the needy population of not only the Gaza Strip but elsewhere in the occupied Palestinian territory. So the Israelis have doubled down on their desire to remove the United Nations presence, but primarily UNRWA's presence, from the Gaza Strip. And we fear, and the court heard from us, that this is an attempt by Israel, quite open, to hasten what they're doing to the Palestinian people on the ground. If the Palestinian people in Gaza in particular do not have the means of subsistence, do not have the means of survival, which Israel is required to provide them, then that will hasten what Israel is in fact doing, trying to ethnically cleanse the territory as part of its genocidal campaign against the Palestinian
Mr.
people.
Imseis, you yourself were referring to the previous ICJ ruling, which has been pretty much dismissed, right, by Israel. So once these proceedings are over, correct me if I'm wrong here, what we'll be left with is a non-binding advisory opinion. Could this, however, be anything more than symbolic?
No, it's far more than symbolic. While it is true that the advisory jurisdiction that the ICJ exercises is formally not binding, what it also is an authoritative determination by the principal judicial organ of the United Nations, which is the highest body in public international law on earth, of what international law requires of all states and all international organizations, and in this case, including Israel. And so, in effect, even though it's not formally binding, the law on which the court makes its pronouncements, and the pronouncements themselves, are in fact binding as a matter of general public international law. But it's not so much the law as well that we need to focus on. Whenever the court makes a determination that is authoritative, that determination in law helps shape what is regarded as legitimate politically, from a humanitarian side, even morally. And so third states are obligated, and you will hear the court pronounce, I do hope, on what third state obligations are in respect of Israel's actions in the territory, to follow what the court says. So too is Israel. Now, you mentioned Israel sort of poo-pooing the opinion from the summer and not caring much about it. And I don't think anyone would expect any different. Look what they're doing and have been doing for decades against the Palestinian people in the occupied Palestinian territory. But that, if that is your focus, you'd be missing it. That isn't the focus. The focus is for the General Assembly to receive an opinion from the court determining what Israel's obligations are. And once it does that, for the General Assembly to act in accordance with that finding or with that opinion. And so this is part of a longer process of holding, in this case, an illegal occupying power, an aggressive power, to account.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Ardi Imseis, legal representative of the State of Palestine at the International Court of Justice. We thank you for your time from The Hague.
Thank you.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.